Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I would like to share an idea or a theory, to be more exact, about the animals in the objective personality system. So this is not my theory, but Antoine's, and I've had him here for an episode of Beta Talks earlier. And we did some pinging and he said that it kind of gave him some thoughts, and then he was stuck for a couple of months in his NT sleep. And this is what he has concluded so far, and I think it's valuable. He has been talking about this a little bit earlier, but this is more in depth. So what is it about? Well, the basic idea is that the depth or the breadth of each animal depends on where in the stack it is placed. So if it's an animal lower in the stack, it will have more depth. And if it's higher up in the stack, it will have more breadth. What does this mean? Well, it means that the higher in the stack the animal is, the more it will gather small input of its function. And when it finally has to make something big out of these little inputs, what it does, it's just a recombination, a variation of these original inputs, because there are so many, and there are so many different possibilities of combining them. So that's the process for the animal higher up in the stack, where in contrast, the lower an animal is, the less it has been collecting these little inputs. So when at some point it has to be used, it will have to start basically from scratch, which means that the first inputs or the first blocks to build something with the last animal is directly super intense and big, because it doesn't come from a recombination of like thousands of little pieces inputs over time, but it's the creation of something big on the spot. So that's the basic theory of how the animals operate differently depending on where in the stack they are. So Antoine gave me a couple of examples for each animal last, so that we could understand more how this, what it looks like in reality. So if we start with the sleep animal, so the sleep last people, when they realize that they have to process their life, since they haven't been doing this homework, so to speak, of processing their life every day, it means that when they have to do it, it's a longer time that needs to be processed, like a year or even a decade. And it's all now needed to be processed in like a one single take. And because of that, it almost becomes like discovering their self for the first time, in a sense. However, in comparison, the sleep high people, they process their life every day. It's these small inputs, like thousands of them all the time. And 99% of the time, it's actually pretty useless, in the sense that it's not for a big purpose, but it's just for, you know, processing my day and being okay with it, more or less. But then at some point, they may still need the big processing, like, who am I? What do I really want? And how can I have missed this from self? And when they do that kind of processing, they don't have to start from scratch or from zero, because they have been doing the processing, the homework of processing. So again, the principle applies that they can just recombine the blocks that they have already processed about themselves for their entire life. So that's how it is playing out for the sleep last animal. If we move on to the play last, which is the last animal for Antoine also himself, he says that he won't react by sharing random little experiences of his to build from others. So this kind of small play ping back, that's not something that he naturally engages in. So again, no small interactions, no small inputs, because it's lower in the stack. I'll just have to scroll a little bit here. I have some notes. So that also means, what he told me, that he's missing the snowball effect of what that type of interaction can create positively over time. So when he does play, which isn't very often, he's actually starting more directly with big blocks. So he's talking about the deepest parts of himself, and also searching for the deepest parts of the other person, and then building on this and playing, so to speak, with this type of interaction only, deep interaction. So in a sense, you can say that this happens from scratch because the person was a stranger to him before the conversation took place. So what he says is that by removing his boundary, he's also creating space for the other person to open up and to play. So they have this place where they can play together. And then by building on top of each other in this interaction on the topic, you actually create a deep relationship super fast, like right on the spot. However, the problem, as he described it to me, is that it won't occur very often. So the relationship will actually die from lack of small interactions. So the small daily play interactions, those are something that he doesn't do them. So yeah, the relationship dies out. Plus also, to be fair, as he said, because once you have opened up that much and the other person has as well, there isn't really an awful lot to talk about anymore. So because you already know, right? And that kills the repeated need of small interactions from both sides, as you already know what the other person would say, or at least close to. So it's the same NI, as you can probably tell. Let me see, I'm struggling here with the observer problems. Okay, let's move on to the consume last. So if we have the same NI in mind, the math would imply that people with high consume will search for, what am I not seeing about myself and the world all the time? That's what they do. They presume that they are missing something, some important information. And so every day they will be searching for that. But it's also useless, like the first and second animal usually are, in a sense. It's useless 99% of the time, because they do search for new and they actually find it, but they don't do anything about it. So it's just a rabbit hole for the sake of more. But when they have to update somewhere, when they really have to change, like in a more drastic sense, they actually already have a map of all these possible ways to be that they haven't done anything about so far, which means that they don't really feel too lost by this forced update. They probably already have an idea of where to dig, where to research more, to stack more of this particular consume that they need. So that's very different with consume last or consume low, because when the forced update thing happens, you feel like you're completely left in the dark. It's like you have acted out this very bad version of yourself, in the sense that you feel that everything needs to be updated, and it really hurts because it's overwhelming. It's just too much at once. And then he's taking an example. He knows a woman who is consume last, and she has been married to the same husband for 40 years. And she has realized that he didn't give her enough. But when she did realize it, it was finally too late. Maybe if she would have realized it earlier, she could have asked him for more, like ask for her need, what OE, her DI would have wanted, so to speak. Ask for more for self. And maybe this husband would have responded positively. Maybe he would have done something about it, or, maybe not. But what is for sure at this point is that it's too late to fix it, because the love is already gone. So this realization was really hard for this woman. And also Antoine shared that when he told her that this is something he had been seeing, like this void was something he had observed for as long as they had known each other, it was maybe even more painful to her that others could see it, but she couldn't. So now, as she can see it, she's acting on it, and she's moving really, really fast. And he said that she's even acting without resentment, because she actually understands that this was her responsibility all along. So that's when he told me that he can see this can be a superpower, because if you have low consume but high blast, the high blast will actually do something about the update, and again on a very deep level, because the consume has now deeply consumed. It has been taking in these big inputs, big blocks. Whereas people with high consume may have the opposite problem of acting on close to no consume at all. However, he said that the people with high consume, they are usually open about if they are missing something. They're not ashamed to admit it. For them, it seems like it's just another blind spot of a list of, many, and that they need to work on. Whereas if you talk to someone like me, someone with low consume, usually if you tell us that we need to update here or there, our instinct will be to be very closed off about it. I know that I can think like, oh, but you don't really understand me. You don't really know me. And it's easy to not see or understand that they actually observe me more objectively from the outside and have seen things about me and my actions that I didn't. So we will be pretty closed off about the the need for update. But then again, if they convince us, maybe with logic or with feeling, persuading us with feeling, we will do so much about it. So that's how it can look for us, consume last. But in a way, high consume people are sometimes too movable. So they're not closed up, but they're too movable, which can also be bad in a sense, because they will be open to one thing and then the next day to the reverse. So basically you are like the wind going in all directions at the same time, and hence you're going nowhere. So where consume low people, Antoine told me, they are more stubborn and they are close-minded in a way, but it can also be a good quality as well as a flaw, because of course the bad update will stay with us for months or even years, but also the opposite. If we have some good updates, we will kind of become immune to the BS of the reverse. We are on our path, no matter what. So for better or worse. So Antoine said that it can be a superpower. So basically the message here is that the animals are all there, regardless of if it's first or fourth or in the middle, but they are used differently. So this is the whole point of his theory. And finally, he was talking about the blast last. I don't know if you have patience to listen to the blast last example as well. Well, I can't hear you, so I'll just go on. Let me see. So I have some notes here for the blast last as well. Okay. So for us blasters, like Antoine and myself, we are aware that a little control on the right spot at the right time can snowball like mad and change the life of someone forever, or for a long time, for good. Even if we, of course, also are taking the risk to create something that is worse for someone. Because if it is bad advice in general, or bad advice for them specifically, then that snowball effect won't be as positive, right? So you need both to make a good blast. You need the good advice, the generally good advice, as well as applied to the person, to that person. And also he says that we are aware that changing the behavior of someone is really complicated, because you can't go too hard on it. because the person will just, disappear or somehow resist if it's too much for them. But there is another aspect as well that you as a blaster need to ask yourself, is this something you are doing for them or is it for yourself? So there is that. I don't find the word. Anyways, and he also mentioned that possibly the double masculine blast, which is even more aggressive, will have even a greater need to make an impact. So a personal need with the blaster, him or herself. Yeah, so that's a possible theory in the theory that modalities can play in as well. But let's not stay on that. The general point is the same, and the same NI is applying here once more. So the higher your blast is, the more you will test little pieces of advice, little control here and there, and you'll see if it matches with the person and see if it gets the results for them too. And then you will track the domino effect of the advice on them, and you will learn more for the next one. And because also as a blaster, you know that you have all the time in the world, or at least that's how it feels, and all the attempts in the world to adjust these little pieces of advice for the person with a new little blast and create some new advice for some sort of doable path. And then also help them, to make them stay on track and to be constant about it. We actually are creating like a big impact over time. So by sharing this information, blasting. And it's again like this snowball effect because of the little interactions of blast, many blasts, right? Over and over time. So in a way, the blasters, they do have access to both the little blast, the little daily blast, and the big blasts building up over time. And the little and what Antoine calls the shittier blast, but easy to implement in the day-to-day for the person, will put them like just a little bit in a better position than the day before. And over time, that will become a big life-changing advice that has actually helped them on to another path or a better path. However, if we look at the blast last people, then they will actually only do the big blocks, the big deep blocks. So it will be the super life-changing blast that they are sharing. And the worst is, the word Antoine used, is the fact that they are also probably right on point with all of their consume and their sleep and their play backing up this little piece of life-changing blast that they are finally doing. So yeah, that's something very valuable, right? Or should be. Here is the problem though. It's too big of a change all at once for anyone to take in or handle. Maybe it will make the person see like a dream somewhere in, far, far away. But then there will be the frustration of I'm not there, and you don't get the steps from the blast blaster how to get there either. So it won't be very easily accessible, this kind of blast. And basically you could say that the blast people, they know how to do this for themselves. They use their own DI instead of the tribe function. So for themselves it works, but they will struggle communicating this to the tribe, to other people around them, because the lack of the practice of that translator that blast actually is. So breaking it down to chewable pieces for the tribe members, that will be the void. Let me see here. So basically the blast people will advise as if the other person was them. So with DI, using DI. And it's also not narrow at all. It's OE. So it probably makes a lot of sense and is true and all of that. At least they can see it. But unfortunately, others probably can't, because of the lack of the competence, you could say, or practice in sharing the information. And that is the bad side of the blast. However, the good one is still the fact that it is life-changing advice. Even if you don't get the path, the OI, you don't get the steps of the action from the blast blaster, but it is valuable in itself. And I was thinking that to accept advice from a blast blaster, I think it's super important to be very, humble, but also, growth mindset, a growth mindset person, and understand like how this works and that this can be super useful for you. Just try and not think about how it's served, but more of the nutrition in it, in the value of the information. Try to see past all of the rest, so to speak. And he also says that the blast blaster is actually very afraid of one thing in particular, and it is that they are afraid to say something wrong that would possibly affect the other person in a negative way. They would never want to impact someone like that. It's more or less a sin for them. So that's kind of the weak point. And they're also missing, in reverse, the responsibility factor that blasters feel or have the obligation towards, because the blaster will feel just the other way around. They will feel that you could have said something to help this person to avoid a problem, some pain, and that's a responsibility. So if you don't, you will feel really bad about it. It's like the no assistance to the person in danger. If you have the power and you don't use it, and we all do actually, because if we see something, we can choose to share it or keep it to ourselves. So the blame wouldn't be because you gave someone maybe a bad advice, but more if you held back some good advice that would actually have helped the people to spare them from difficulties. So let me see. There are just a few more points here. Yeah, so yeah, and there is another weak point then for the Blast Laster as well, because okay, they didn't give the bad advice, but they also didn't give the good advice that could have spared people from pain. And the downside of that is that people may be resentful towards them later when they discover you knew this, but you didn't say anything. Or if you weren't okay with this, why didn't you say anything? I would have been more than okay with you to do that, etc. So you have access to some important information that you are keeping to yourself. So yeah, sure, it's a huge risk to give someone information, to share what you see and what you know, and that may or may not impact other people positively, but then remember the other side of it as well. Yeah, I think we could just finish off with a little summary of his theory. And so what he says, if you just condense all of this down to the little NI nugget, it would be to say that the higher the animal is, the higher the gathering of little inputs and the use of little interactions of this function that then can be recombined into a more complex one if needed. And the lower the animal is in the stack, the lower the gathering, the lower amount of small interactions. And this can be both a flaw and a superpower, how we use this. We are either using our animal in depth with intensity, that's the last two animals, or with cautiousness, careful, but with breath, like everywhere, more superficially, maybe you could say, but you can build something deeper with those pieces as well. So breadth is high animals and depth is for the low animals. That was my sharing from Antoine's theory on the animals of the objective personality system. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please let me know what you think. And we will continue this discussion further in the community. Have a good one and talk to you later. Bye.